Hi, I'm pleased to meet you in this lecture. My name is Myung-Ju Kim. I have been researched and taught IT, especially information security at Seoul Women's University. The theme of this lecture is AI ethics. This ethics is not for AI, but for humans. I will cover the ethics that humans should have when they create, supply, and use AI. Let's take a quick look at what we are going to learn in this lecture. First, we'll explore the reasons why we need AI ethics. Then, I will introduce the process of deriving the new ethics for AI. AI ethics starts with basic principles. So, I will introduce these principles and also talk about ethics guidelines derived from the principles. For this, we will look into such matters, focusing on Korea's AI ethics called Seoul Pact. In this lecture, I will try to help you grasp these 4 ideas. And we'll deal with these 6 topics in order. Even before AI was fully used, there was discussions about the AI ethics. We should know 2 main backgrounds behind this. One is the theoretical background and the other is the practical background. Let's look first at the theoretical background. In the past, new technologies always require new ethics. New technologies are expected to have a positive impact on society, but they are always accompanied by side effects and dysfunctions. The new technology of the internet gave birth to internet ethics. New biotechnologies have given rise to bioethics. Now, AI is rapidly spreading throughout society, making it difficult to address adverse effects by law. So we need AI ethics as a precautionary measure. Currently, we are using a weak AI called artificial narrow intelligence, that is ANI. But over time, AI is expected to develop into artificial general intelligence, that is AGI, and artificial superintelligence, that is ASI. In particular, people keep arguing that if AI is become superintelligence, it could pose a threat to mankind. And the most effective way to prevent this tragic situation in the future is AI ethics. Now let's move on to the practical background that makes us need AI ethics. AI has already been adopted and used significantly in our daily lives. Therefore, we are already facing problems stemming from the use of AI in reality. So let's examine the necessity and direction of AI ethics by introducing some typical examples that have already disappeared in reality. AI can contain prejudice and discrimination when making decisions. In a trial, a human judge can be influenced by a number of factors. But unlike a human judge, AI is considered not to be affected by cognitive bias. Therefore, AI has been more adopted in courts. For example, USA federal courts have been using an AI called Compass since 2000 to make parole decisions based on the possibility of recidivism. In the European Union, AI called Sabri has been used since 2006 to assess the risk of youth violence. In 2016, a media group called ProPublica officially announced that Compass shows prejudice and discrimination against black criminals. There were objections to this, but this raises the possibility that AI may not be fair, even when making very important decisions. AI learns from data, so if prejudice and discriminations are reflected in data, AI that learned it may not be fair. So in this case, an ethical issue arises. AI developers must strive to keep discrimination and prejudice away from data and algorithm in order to create a fair AI. As one of practical reasons for the necessity of AI ethics, we can think of the increasing number of misuses and abuses by AI prosumers. AI algorithms and data are mostly open to everyone. Such openness is one of the keys to the success of AI today. Therefore, general consumers can become producers at any time. These people who serve as both a consumer and a developer are called prosumers. These prosumers can greatly contribute to the increase in misuses and abuses of AI. Let's take an example. In 2017, Google releases an AI-based program called Visual Watermark Remover. A watermark refers to an identifying image added to a work to protect the work's copyright. However, the Google's AI program removes such watermarks, so general users can infringe copyrights using this AI. In 2018, Google announced Google Duplex as the next generation AI assistant to replace the Google Assistant in Google smartphones. During the demonstration, Duplex made an appointment by calling a hairdresser directly. The hairdresser thought the caller was a human, not an AI. In 1950, British mathematician Alan Turing proposed a Turing test. This tests whether a computer thinks like a human, and in this case, Google's Duplex can be evaluated to pass the Turing test well enough in phone reservations. Prosumers, however, may use the Duplex for phone frauds, voice phishing, or even business disruptions. AI-based Google Duplex is already installed in Google smartphones in some countries. Google's Duplex uses and stores Google phone users' individual data inputs for further learning, so we should consider the ethical issue of privacy infringement here. You can use AI or other technologies to artificially transform and synthesize existing materials and media, and we call the outputs synthetic media. Synthetic media are recently created most frequently by faking existing images or videos of a person. Typical examples are AI programs such as deepfake, face swap, StyleGAN, and StyleGAN 2. They use internally AI technologies such as autoencoders or GANs. Due to the nature of AI, such programs require data for learning, and easily accessible images and videos of celebrities can be used not only for the purpose but also for producing synthetic media. Deepfake videos of celebrities were producing without their consent, undermining social trust. Furthermore, it raises additional ethical issues such as defamation, sexual exploitation, cyberbullying, and fraud. Another practical reason for the need of AI ethics is the change in the specific relationship between humans and AI. In order to make humans feel more intimacy with AI, more and more AI is created in the form of a human being. As of 2020, a total of 251 AI-based humanoids were officially launched. There are even social robots that can emotionally interact with humans. Companion bots and spouse bots are sold at high prices in Spain, Canada, and the United States. The problem is that users' perception of AI is rapidly changing. People who get more familiar with AI tend to spend more time with it and sometimes become addicted to AI. Recently, there is an increasing number of petitions asking the government to allow marriage with AI and arguing that the government has to change the law if necessary. As AI technology develops, AI will become more familiar to humans. So more people will call for granting AI the legal status and personality rights. Accordingly, it will be necessary to re-establish the definition of human beings and, by extension, basic rights and personal rights. And it is expected that there will be a huge ethical debate in the nearest future about what kind of relations humans and AI will form while they coexist with each other. The discussion of AI ethics started a very long time ago. The timeline you see outlines the result of our global commitment to AI ethics. In 1942, even before AI was officially launched, Isaac Asimov announced the 3 laws of robotics in his short story Round Around. This was also adapted to the film I, Robot. The AI ethics that we are learning now dates back to the 2010 proposal by Professor Nick Bostrom at University of Oxford in the United Kingdom. It was in 2016 that the state and the public organizations started citing and conducting research on AI ethics. Korea also organized the Intelligent Information Society Ethics Committee in 2016 to conduct team-based research on AI. At that time, I served as the chairperson. 3 years later, in 2018, the outcome was officially announced under the name of the Intelligent Information Society Ethics, or Seoul Pact. In this lecture, I'll introduce the Seoul Pact by focusing the cases related to this AI ethics. Even in 2021, further research on AI ethics is underway in the international organizations such as UNESCO. Now let's see how to derive the AI ethics. We have learned that a new technology called AI can cause unexpected side effects and dysfunctions. AI is not the first technology that has resulted in such adverse side effects. We have kept experiencing the emergence of new ethics whenever new technologies appeared. For example, when the advent of computers and the internet transformed the industrialized society to information society, we newly derived the internet ethics. So based on our past experiences, we can once again derive the AI ethics. In order to derive the AI ethics, there are several lessons that we can learn from existing internet ethics. New information and communication technologies, such as the internet, were attractive enough to generate the 7 temptations that Richard Rubin mentioned. However, they resulted in the online disinhibition effect, as Schuller pointed out, and they were followed by new ethical issues. The new ethics was called by several names, and the Internet ethics, coined by Professor Duncan Langford in 2003, became the most common used. In 1994, Richard Spinello proposed 4 basic principles based on the technical characteristics of the Internet to derive Internet ethics. And based on these 4 basic principles, specific ethical guidelines such as Code of Ethics for Netizens were additionally derived. And based on these experiences, we can derive new AI ethics. There are a few things to consider first before we think about how AI ethics can be differentiated from Internet ethics. The most important question is, who is the one who has to comply with the ethics? In case of the Internet ethics, Internet using netizens are the key stakeholders. Ethics for Internet service providers was added later, but they are not key players here. Unlike the Internet, AI was not the infrastructure that was universally established at the initial stage. So, developers were considered key players of the AI ethics. However, AI has been adopted faster than expected, and the entire society is now under the influence of AI. So, it has become inevitable to expand the range of stakeholders subject to the ethics. As for the Seoul Pact, Korea's first AI ethics research started in 2016, and the ethics was released in 2018. The Seoul Pact defines the stakeholders subject to the ethics as all members of the intelligent information society. In this AI ethics, not only 3 major stakeholders of developers, suppliers, and users, but also the government as the new ecological environment are regarded as a stakeholder of the ethics too. The UNESCO recommendation of the ethics of AI, which is still under discussion in 2021, also views AI ethics stakeholders as all members of society. UNESCO uses the term AI actors to convey the meanings. Therefore, as shown in this figure, AI ethics can be derived with a very similar approach to that of existing Internet ethics. After identifying the characteristics of the new technology, AI here, we should establish ethical principles first. And by interpreting these principles for stakeholders, we can derive specific ethical guidelines. Korea's AI ethics research team, including me, analyzed the characteristics of AI as shown in this figure. We analyzed the various problems and contentious issues related to AI using the 5 whys method. This method is also used by Toyota to analyze automobile defects. And we identified 2 characteristics that are significantly different from the characteristics of other technologies. First, AI as intelligent as humans, or in some cases, even more intelligent than humans. Second, AI is independent, capable of making its own decisions without human assistance. Based on these differentiated characteristics of AI, we proposed 4 basic principles of AI ethics. AI has 2 distinctive characteristics that other innovative technologies cannot have, as previously suggested, but it also has 2 common characteristics with other innovative technologies that change society significantly. The characteristics that AI and other innovative technologies have in common are AI is technology for all mankind and technology that ignites social transformation. Based on these common characteristics, publicness and accountability were respectively selected as ethical principles. As I introduced earlier, AI has distinctive characteristics as technology that decides its own and operates autonomously, and the technology intelligent like a human. These differentiated characteristics resulted in ethical principles of controllability and transparency respectively. As a result, a total of 4 basic principles of AI ethics were established and named Soul Pact by taking the first letters of them. The basic principles of AI ethics are decided differently for each country or organization. Depending on how to define the basic principles, we can differently include other principles under them. In Soul Pact, we first defined the basic 4 principles well, and according to the definitions, we established similarity and inclusive relationship with other principles. Now I will explain what publicness, the first basic principles of Soul Pact, means. AI should ultimately be a technology for humanity. AI should be helpful for as many people as possible, and it should be introduced to bring benefits, development, and welfare to all members of society. The economic prosperity brought by AI should be shared widely for the benefit of all mankind. Therefore, publicness is closely related to and encompasses the principle with other names such as human-centeredness, inclusion, fairness, and benefit sharing. Accountability, the second basic principle of AI ethics, implies that all stakeholders should be held legally responsible for their AI-related actions. They should participate in public discussion for solving problems possibly caused by AI. And they should continuously improve their competencies necessary for the sustainable development of AI. They also have to clarify the distribution of responsibilities in accidents caused by AI and fulfill social obligations, including sharing safety-related information and protecting their rights, user rights, and interests. Accountability is related to and encompasses the principle of responsibility, mutual cooperation, proportionality, and competence development. Controllability, the third basic principle of AI ethics, means that AI must function properly in any environment, and all possible risks must be directly controlled by humans. Human control over AI and measures for malfunctions should be prepared in advance. And the right to use AI should be guaranteed as much as possible. Controllability is related to and encompasses the principle of safety and security, robustness, trustworthiness, non-maleficence, and human oversight. Transparency, the last and the fourth basic principle of AI ethics, signifies that when AI decides something on its own, it provides explanation of the decision process to the parties concerned. AI should not create unnecessary hidden functions that users are unaware of. All stakeholders should share AI-related experience and information in the event of an accident. AI must function properly in any environment, and all possible risks must be directly controlled by humans. Any information on potential risks from the use of technologies and services should be made public and shared. And all personal information must be handled appropriately. Transparency relates to and includes the principle of explainability, traceability, auditability, interpretability, and ethical assessment. We have learned 4 basic principles of AI ethics. From now on, we can specify AI ethics guidelines for each basic principle from the perspective of AI ethics various key stakeholders. Here, I will show you what specific guideline can be applied to key players of AI developers, providers, and users based on the first basic principles of publicness. First, these are the guidelines for AI developers to follow based on publicness. AI developers should exclude discrimination based on gender, race, religion, region, and ethnicity in the entire process of AI development, and the universal welfare of humanity should be the first priority. Access to AI should be provided to the social underprivileged and the vulnerable who are likely to be alienated from the intelligent information society. The next are guidelines that AI providers should comply with in terms of publicness. AI providers must supply products that serve the public interest. They have to use AI with good intentions and keep an interest in solving social problems. Finally, I will tell you about the guidelines AI users should abide by based on the principle of publicness. Users should never use AI technology and services for malicious purposes. And users should actively participate in improving AI products for the public good. For guidelines for each stakeholder subject to the remaining principles, you can see the materials provided with this lecture. The AI ethics is a new challenge for everyone. People feel great burden about compliance with the AI ethics, and it is difficult to remember basic AI ethics principles even if they are minimized. Dozens of guidelines are even more burdensome and even more difficult to remember. Accordingly, in 2018, AI Chart of Ethics was additionally created and announced by summarizing the principles and the guidelines of Seoul Pact in one page. I recommend that various members of social related to AI, such as companies, governments, and universities, think enough about AI ethics and create their own simple chart of ethics like this. With this, we have examined the overall AI ethics. In this lecture, we have looked at why AI ethics is necessary, especially focusing on theoretical backgrounds and practical cases. And by looking back at the process of establishing the existing internet ethics, we have learned how to derive a new AI ethics. AI ethics starts with deriving basic principles based on the characteristics of AI technology. I have introduced the Seoul Pact as a case study in Korea. It represents publicness, accountability, controllability, and transparency as its 4 basic principles. AI ethics are not just for developers. All members of society need to have a sense of AI ethics before the new technology spread further. With this, I wrap up this lecture. If you want to know the content mentioned in this lecture in more detail, please find the materials on our website listed in the following references. Thank you for your attention.